I know more than you think I know. Hell, I know more than you know you know.
No, you don't. You can never keep up with my flawless technique. That's why I floored you in '02 and the spring of '99.
Technique doesn't get you 18 medals and a Christy Yamaguchi Lifetime Achievement Award. I am figure skating.
Stop it!
Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Hollywood Gold. I'm your host, Daniela Taplin Lundberg, and I'm here with Bex Camerata. How are you, Bex?
Ooh, I can just be like one name now. I'm going to be like Oprah or Cher. It's going to be Bex now. That's Bex. That's my goal, is that our podcast becomes
and we're going to like shorten it to BEX. So, Bex, I'm so excited about this episode today. We're doing Blades of Glory.
Yeah.
And we love comedy. We love comedy. For whatever reason, we are not known for comedy. But the two comedies that we've produced have been so fun.
And successful.
I would say Hello, My Name is Doris was just like such a success for us. It continues to generate money.
Yeah.
And Together, which we did with Ed Helms and Patty Harrison, is another comedy that has done quite well for us. And not many films can say that, where you're like generating more money after the fact.
Yeah.
So I would like us to do more comedy. I think it's something we're endeavoring to do actually as we speak. But we wanted to dive into one that like is become a bit of a legacy film, a great platform for Will Ferrell. He loves a comedy with a sports backdrop. And so Blades of Glory typifies that in the greatest of ways. And we're about to talk to Will Speck and Josh Gordon, the directors of the film. And so I cannot wait. Will Speck and Josh Gordon. It is so nice to meet you both. We're about to dive into one of the comedy greats, Blades of Glory. I just rewatched it and it really holds up.
Thank you.
It's like Will Ferrell at his best, and Will Arnett and Amy Poehler have like such a youthful glow and like glory about them. And I just cannot wait to hear about the making of this movie. And I'm hoping it like matches what's in my mind of you guys like trying not to ruin takes with, you know, extreme moments of laughter.
There was a lot. Yes.
Was there? Okay. Yeah. So I'm so interested to hear how you guys linked up and where this story came from. But like, you know, the heart of this is really about like the making of the thing that has become a legacy movie that people probably still talk to you about all the time. And I find like you probably have this in your lives where there's like one or two movies that people always want to talk about with you. And I would imagine this is one of those. Does that feel accurate? Does that resonate?
Yeah, this is absolutely one of those. It's seminal. And it's funny because it's always around the Olympics, around the Winter Olympics. It always comes up a lot because they play it like, you know, on TV, but also in broadcast revival houses. And that's when it seems to come up a lot because it's really art imitating life. So there's a lot of, anytime there's male figure skating or figure skating for that matter, adjacent, even I, Tanya, somehow Blades of Glory works its way into the conversation.
So start from the beginning and talk to me about your first memory of it. And I just want to hear it from your perspective.
Well, I think, you know, it really started on an airplane ride from Los Angeles to New York, right, Josh?
Yeah.
And sent the script. It was our first feature. So we had done a bunch of short films and we were writing a lot. So we were very hard on material, just being that it was going to be our first. And we were both reading it on the plane in different areas. Obviously, we weren't sitting next to each other.
But you were on the same plane.
We were on the same flight. And we kept sort of looking up and saying like, this is really funny. Oh, this is a really good scene. And did you get to the part where like we were sort of sharing back and forth? And I think because we were partners and we were young partners and we squabbled and dealt with all the things that partners dealt with, there was so much of that in the original script written by Craig and Jeff Cox. That's what we really tapped into, is just the comedy of that, you know, interplay between, you know, two partners and the struggle that comes from that. And I think we were really amused by that and related to it. So I think that was kind of, right, Josh, that was our entry point.
Yeah, and I think it also kind of had this like baked in inherent kind of heart to it because it's sort of about found family and they're both kind of damaged guys and they're sort of brothers from another mother and it had a
Right.
lot of things that I think Will and I kind of just like related to on some level.
What's the Wim Wenders thing about getting in the car, Josh, that we always say? Or is it John Sayles? I think it's John Sayles.
John Sayles, yeah, said what you learn with making movies is that it's a lot like hitchhiking, and the more movies you make, you learn when not to get into the car. Kind of that thing,
And I think that's sort of a good analogy here because the more people we met involved with it, the more we felt like we had to do it. Because we met first Jeremy Kramer, at that time Amblin DreamWorks, and he was really smart and had great ambitions for it. And then we met Ben Stiller, who was attached to play Will's role originally. And we spent a lot of time with Ben, who produced the movie, and Stuart Kornfeld, who's no longer with us, but who was just a comedy genius.
Was one of the greats. Totally.
Yeah. And so I think when you get a script, it's a very cold process because, you're not really, unless you know those people, especially as your first movie, it can be really scary. And I think the more you dimensionalize it with the people that are involved with it, the more you get a sense of it. And I think we were really into all of their points of view and how they saw the movie and the ambitions for it. And, Ben was sort of at this great moment. He's done a series of different kinds of moments. Now he's in another one, but of comedy with Zoolander and the stuff he was producing and Dodgeball. And so I think it was just exciting to be part of his process of that.
Like Red Hour was just like churning out like the best comedies of that time. I mean, like Tropic Thunder Lives On is like one of my all-time like favorite comedies. But forgive me, was this your first feature that you guys were coming on to direct?
Yeah, it was the first.
Were you guys at all sort of intimidated by taking on this like script that obviously was going to have great talent attached and, the funniest actors of our time?
It's weird. It's like looking back on it, we should have been. I mean, that's sort of stupidity of youth. I think I love it. Sort of had arrogance and kind of were like, yeah, like we belong here. You know what I mean? And then when you kind of got through this, like what could have been like a minefield where anything could have gone off, you're sort of like, what just happened? I mean, it was incredible.
And I think the fact that there was two of us, you really articulate all of your anxieties with each other. And so while that's happening, the movie is happening. And then it's like, before you know it, you're like, wait, we should really pay attention to how anxious we are. And then it's like, we've already directed the movie.
Totally.
It's almost like the fact that we could dialogue about it almost sort of deflated the balloon in a big way.
And I think like that's one of the things with age is you allow your anxiety to take on more power than you do when you're young.
Ignorance is the greatest gift any director.
100%. Okay, so you were sent the script, but did you have to go pitch yourselves?
Yeah, I think there were a couple other, horses in the race. They did a pretty good job of not telling us that. Sort of blindly going into it. But I think, look, the way that Red Hour worked at the time, they had made Starsky and Hutch with Todd Phillips. They'd made Dodgeball with Ross and Thurber. There was a good community of filmmakers. They were making their Tenacious D movies. So I think that they were pretty good about ushering whoever was in before you out the back door before you came in the front door, because I think Ben understood what that process as an actor was like to sort of audition in a room full of other hopefuls that looked just like you. So I think we were a little held back from that process. And again, we hadn't really been through it. So to us, now we really ask all those hard questions up front. But I think then we were just like, oh, okay, we really like this. Let's go in and talk about it. We weren't as strategic based, as you get later in life, What was your pitch? What do you think was the thing that like made them embrace you, these like young, talented filmmakers?
I think we had kind of, again, arrogance. We had an ambition for the movie that we wanted it to punch above its weight, that we didn't want it to sort of be a silly, movie about two dudes like skating together, but that its thematics had to be like really tacked down. And we sort of pitched that we wanted the skating sequences to be the funniest part of the movie. And there was sort of I think that, no, that's just the stuff you get through, and you kind of all the off ice stuff is what is really the gold. And we were like, no, like there's this new technology called face replacement. And we really want like literally in the trailer to see, at the time but then it became Will Ferrell, literally doing a triple Lutz landing and coming right into the camera. And if you can show that, everybody will want to go see the movie. And I think Ben is also like an ambitious filmmaker. All of his movies punch way, way, way above his weight.
That's right.
And now obviously become, you know what I mean, a very like Tony drama director as well. So I think there was always this like, you know, self-hating comedy thing where like, no, this will be an important movie.
Now I'm thinking about it. I think we also made a reel. And I think in that reel, we sort of did a clip reel montage. And I think we talked to Ben a lot about Chaz's character being like Prince in Purple Rain. So we had a lot of clips of Prince and like off-camera Prince because of that sort of sexuality and that self-seriousness and like pulling up next to Apollonia on a motorcycle and sort of taunting her. I think he sort of, it was so strange and left of center alongside of our music choices. And I think it was weird because he played it very close to the vest. You know, he wasn't sort of, you know, riding along the narrative saying like, oh, that's great, or oh, I love that. But afterwards, Stuart sort of came back in and said, oh, well, he really loved you and loved those ideas. And so I think it was also, as Josh said, besides blind arrogance, a little bit of sort of weirder ambitions, you know?
Yes.
It hit above just kind of a joke delivery system that hopefully was the thing that sort of cinched it for us. But yeah.
First of all, Josh, what you said about like brotherhood and found family, that is a theme that is so relatable and beyond just like, you know, a dick joke or whatever. And I was watching and I was like, oh, this is funny. Like, this is great. The Arnett and the Polar stuff, that's great. Their dynamic is great. And then you get to the to the actual sequences of the ice skating. And I was like, I was on the train snorting. Like, I couldn't find a Kleenex because it was so funny. And the way you guys shot it was like so brilliant. And so I feel like you just added so many layers to what could have been a very like simple construct of like another sports movie with like jokes laid on, you know? So I love all that stuff. I could totally see how you nailed it. So when did Ben decide to sort of step aside? And when you guys got the job, was that meaning like you were a green light, you were going into prep, or did you have to assemble your cast?
None of our movies have we ever gotten a green light. It's always like a yellow light and you're kind of you're rolling forward. And then you spend so much money that you're, okay, I guess we're making the movie.
Right.
We did start some prep, but there was really kind of a table read that actually had a sort of alternate cast to the movie.
Cool.
Yeah.
Alec Baldwin.
Yeah.
And I think Zooey Deschanel played, you know, the sort of love interest role.
Yeah.
And Ben was playing, you know, Chaz. And it went great. Everybody loved it. And you got this sense of real momentum afterwards. But Ben kind of came out of it and was like, God, I feel like something's off. I don't know what it is. Like, I feel like I'm not the right guy to play this.
Well, and he had said, to his credit, he sort of said he felt like he'd played this part before. You know what I mean? And I think he wanted to do something. He was just at a point where he was coming off of 2 back-to-back comedies. And if he felt like he wanted to do something slightly different, and he did. He went off and did Night at the Museum, which, you know, at the time was like a 4-quadrant movie. And it was like
crazy.
First where, you know, a comedy star from a different genre jumped into that space. You know what I mean? It had been specific up to that point. And I think he wanted to do something different. And he said,
sort of great. It was like, I'll produce it. And who do we want to, you know, replace me? And we were all like, Will Ferrell.
Who else could nail that in the way that he did? Okay, so you immediately go to Will.
Well, going to Will was actually physically going to Will because he was shooting Talladega Nights. So we actually got on a plane with Ben and flew to North Carolina and sat in the back room. We've had so many meetings with actors in like weird airless back rooms of restaurants. We always joke about.
I think it was at the Palms near the racetrack. It was like the most.
Stop.
It was
Stop.
The Palm, or was it the Palm or the Grill? They're the same to me.
Something like.
It was one of the two of those. Some steakhouse back room with no windows and no air, and it was Josh, myself, Ben, Jimmy Miller, and Will, and it was great. You know, he was shooting that, and we talked a lot about Blades. And then I think we had a second meeting with him where we went to his house.
Next morning, we went to his house, and he kind of cooked breakfast kind of for us. And it was
like he cooked eggs for you guys while you were talking about the role?
Something like, I think it was, or waffles or something like that. It was something like,
there was definitely a breakfast situation going on. And also people kept dropping off things at the house for him from the neighborhood, like cookies
Stop.
and baked goods.
Just like
Yeah.
leaving them on the front or like ringing the bell.
And it became like a running bit because it was like the doorbell would ring and there'd be like a plate of cookies. And Will's like, I don't, these are from the neighbors. Do you guys want some? So when we left, we sent him a plate of cookies.
Oh my God. Yes.
Yeah.
Nail it.
So that was super fun and super lucky. And as you know, movies are lightning in a bottle, and it's rare that you get that happen. That sequence happens so quickly and so easily.
That was also the strength of Red Hour and Stuart and Ben, as they were able to hold the movie together and move forward.
Was it like Will would do this right after Talladega Nights kind of thing?
He would start training after Talladega Nights because there was a lot of training that had to happen. So like a sports movie or a Marvel movie, Arnett and Poehler, John Heder, and a little bit Jenna Fischer, but all had skating coaches. And Will and Amy did it at the Chelsea Piers in New York City. I think actually Amy talks about that training and sleeping through a lot of her sessions on her tour with TNF, which is true.
She would just not show up or show up late?
I think a little bit of both. She'll have to, but yeah.
Arnett was actually accomplished.
Right. He was like a big hockey player, right?
Canada.
Yeah, totally.
Hockey.
Yeah.
He skated circles around us. Yeah.
But Will and Heder couldn't skate, right? Like they were not.
Will's very athletic, actually. Will's an athlete, and Will likes to train for things. I mean, he had done Talladega, he had done he was about to do semi-pro. So he loved, and he's a sports guy. He loves sports. So he actually took to it pretty well, although he's so tall that on skates, he's like 6'4", or 6'5". So it's like, the farther you are away from the ice, it's sobering because if you skate as a kid, which I did, you really have this great agility and speed. And the taller you get, the bigger you get, the farther away, the more dangerous it is. So Will really had it up against it. But John is a great physical comedian and a great dancer. And so he had a very lithe sort of elegant quality. So they both took to it in their own ways that was actually completely right for the characters, because Will was a very brute skater who had a lot of mass and energy. And John was a very sort of light on his feet, sort of swan-like skater.
Chaz Michael Michaels, an ice-devouring sex tornado, spawned in the hellfires of Motown.
Troubled childhood? If you call being a 9-year-old kid with a 35-year-old girlfriend troubled.
Michaels.
Macaron.
I see you got fat.
So you still look like a 15-year-old girl, but not hot.
You crushed my dream.
Dream shit, I haven't had one of those in years.
Zip it, Chaz. Zip it, or I will punch you in your crap lousy face.
Hey, this ends tonight.
Daytime, you douche.
Had you always envisioned John opposite Will?
John was first up.
When we got sent the script.
Oh.
He was coming off of kind of the momentum of Napoleon Dynamite. So he was this hot young,
totally
kind of star in the comedy world. And, we loved him in that movie and thought he was absolutely totally original and funny. And like Will said, he's a truly physical comedian.
Yeah.
He on ice would come constantly with new ideas of I thought I could do this. I thought I could do, whereas Will was amazing and brilliant, but had to really build up his confidence on the ice before he started kind of coming out on this stuff.
And also the hardest skater to double. There was only one double for Will in the country, basically. I think actually he was Canadian and we brought him in.
No, there's no Olympic level skaters with Will's physique.
And it was so funny because we were like penny stocks. We were brokering skating doubles. So it was our skating tech, Sarah Cara Howard, was I found this guy. We were like, give us his photo. He's 6'3". Well, we could do that with skates. What can he do? And it's well, he can do a double axel. We were we need to see it. And it's each double would have their move that we would want. So it was this kind of checkerboard of you'd pull Will out, you'd throw the double in, they'd do the triple axel, then you'd throw them out. And it was funny because they all had to sort of fit Will's physique type and his skating outfit. So we had to monitor everybody's weight and muscle mass.
Oh my God.
The amazing thing about this is, I, at least for myself, and I'm pretty sure with Will, had almost no deep understanding of the skating world. Actually, didn't enjoy watching the Olympics because for me, it was always like these poor people have trained their whole lives. They're going to mess up in one move and then their whole life is going to be over. It's too tense. I want to watch it, right?
Totally.
And up to us literally like supervising Olympic level people and being like, that person's not good enough.
Footnote though is speak for yourself about watching figure skating. I mean, as like a young gay boy, like that was very important to me. So
I'm right there with you. But wait, you're telling me that all the physical action in the movie is actual skaters. I thought that a lot of it was CG.
It was funny. We had the most CG shots of any face replacement movie at that time, but you couldn't shoot the entire movie. Like for long parts of it, Will would have to skate out on the ice. They would have to have acting together. Some of their basic moves they would have to do for real. And like Will said, like you fall once. I mean, I fell day one of the thing and broke a rib. Like you're done. So they had to do like 50-60% of the skating themselves, and then all the really, really complex stuff was CG.
Okay. But you had doubles actually doing like double axles.
yeah, we had everybody doing, yeah. And as we said, it's a little bit like a trick skating thing because there's just certain skaters that do certain things and it's a known reputation. Like it really is, if you can do a move that's like the best version of it, you're known in the community. So we would fly people in for a move and then fly them out. So yeah.
Okay, so back up. Everyone's training, like we're working towards a shoot. Where did you shoot?
We shot like 2 or 3 weeks in Montreal, which was really like the end of the movie takes place in Montreal, that huge chase sequence and all that. And then the rest of it we shot in LA on stages and at the sports arena in LA. Was just torn down.
I had heard that Heater had a hairline fracture or something.
Yeah, it was a big deal. And it was actually the most informative thing about the movie. And it was challenging because John broke his ankle and it really sort of put the whole schedule upside down. I mean, now the only thing we can compare it to now is like a Writers Guild strike, because like when everything shuts down for 2 or 3 months in the middle of a movie, and there's sort of a pro and con to that. The con is obviously you've lost the momentum of the movie. The pro is it gives you a second in the editing room, hopefully, to sort of shuffle and figure out what you have, what you need. And it's a great advantage to the movie. We would not have survived that movie had we not had that unfortunate accident happen.
The real big thing was the movie had been put together both at a certain budget level, but also, with the skating sequences kind of intermixed with the regular part of the shoot. And the problem with it was we just didn't have enough prep time to make those sequences everything they could be. And when he broke his ankle, the only way to do it was to shoot all the live action parts, go down for 4 months, and then shoot all the skating sequences together, which allowed us to previs the entire movie.
So it was actually over a summer, and it was actually a great summer. Like we look back on those 3 months as an amazing time because we had an editing room up and running with Rick Pearson and Greg Hayden, who were 2 great editors. Mm-hmm. And we were dealing with all the live action stuff, like Josh said. And then we would go with our skating choreographer, me and Josh, and cameras, and we would just start rehearsing, and cutting things together and pre-visualizing all of the skating sequences. So it was a really creative time, and it was a really fun time. The only challenge was we'd shown our assembly without the skating sequences. We had to show that to the studio just because, to their credit, they were spending all of this money to hold everybody.
Right.
And it was hard to watch the movie without that because it's like a musical song. So it was challenging viewing, even though it was funny and great. You lost these giant, set pieces. And if you imagine the movie without the skating, the off ice is great, but it's not a movie. So it was sort of like we knew that we had something special up our sleeves, and we were sort of in a race to finish that and realize it. And Josh was actually amazing because he really marshaled this pre-visualization process in a really incredible way. We had an amazing AD named Peter Cohn, who, went on to do all of Inarritu's movies and whatnot. He's like, still, can you believe that I made Blades of Glory? It's sort of his out of resume sort of anecdote to him. But he was
the previs allowed us to do, and because they had already scanned Will and John's faces, they were actually able to give us a previs that had some basic performance. So when you watched the previses, you could fully see
Oh my God.
Everything. And we showed the studio. Then when they saw that, they were like euphoric, and except for how much it cost. They were that happy.
So are you suggesting that if John Hader hadn't broken his foot, that the comedy of those sequences may not have been as good as they are?
They would not have been as tight and as polished.
I totally believe that.
And I think we would have done something okay, because I think we knew what we were doing to a certain extent, but I think it just allowed us to get so much more ahead of it and so much more rehearsed. And actually, we could just be calm and have the actors participate in the choreography. And I mean, everything seemed to be working. And the other thing that was really fun after is when we went back to shoot, we were down to such a science that each shot had a number, and we had a giant room, at the stadium with all the boards and all the cards with their numbered, shots.
Very technical. We actually went for almost a month before with the entire crew with doubles and rehearsed every single shot in the sequences, cut them together, we just really were able to make the sequences exactly.
So yeah, our fucking up John's laces so he would secretly break his ankle came, that worked.
But let's get back to casting. I always love to hear that, because I really do think you guys assembled such an incredible cast of tremendous actors and tremendous comedians. And, I was listening to some Jeff Garlin podcast, but great actors do not always make great comedians. And sometimes they'll bring in a great actor and they'll try to ad lib a Larry David episode, and it's does not work. And so I'm curious, because it seemed to be such an incredible cast that had such great chemistry. I just want to hear about assembling them and then observing them on set and how closely you adhered to the script. So take me through it.
Yeah, I mean, it was really a boat that everybody just kept getting into. It was just an exciting process, because we had, as Josh said, it sort of came with John Heder and Ben Stiller. When Ben decided to step aside after the table read, we then had Will. Prior to the table read, we really wanted Arnett and Poehler, who were really coming up together in a moment. I remember there was a New York Times article, in the Sunday Style section, interviewing them, and they were just so fucking dynamic and amazing, still are. But that was a sort of a no-brainer. When we met with them, those characters really came to life, and they were sort of instrumental in helping build that.
And they were married at the time?
They were married, yeah. They were married, but they hadn't had their kids yet. So they really needed a hobby, and we gave them. But they were amazing. And then it was really Coach, because as Josh said, Alec Baldwin did the reading and then was not available. So we had to find somebody. And I think we wanted to find very dramatic, pulled from a sports movie. You know what I mean? Our archetype was, we wanted, Hackman from Hoosiers.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Great reference. Love that. Yeah.
Yeah. So we went to a lot of actors who were such fans of Will and such fans of Ben, but were guys, really? I'm going to do this? It doesn't feel like my thing. I think we went to Tommy Lee Jones. I think we flew to New York and met Willem Dafoe. We had a really funny coffee with Kurt Russell. And I think we also might have met Dennis Quaid. I think, we were sort of everyone who was the Hollywood cowboy, who had a Marlboro cigarette, and a denim shirt, we seemed to have coffee with. It's amazing. And we had been huge Craig T. Nelson fans. And I think the thing that was exciting about him is he was I think he was just coming off of Coach, a great successful sitcom. And I think he hadn't done a movie in a while. So we sort of caught the momentum of that. But also there was a little bit of him coming back into doing movies, that character coming back, and sort of finding his way. Very parallel.
Love that.
And exciting. And he just really got it. And he was gruff in all the right ways and masculine in all the right ways, and understood the balance.
He actually started as a comedian. He was part of a famous sort of troupe with, who was the director who did Good Morning Vietnam and everything?
Barry Levinson.
he and Barry Levinson had been comedians together,
Right.
like on the Tonight Show, like in the 60s.
Oh my God.
So he actually has tremendous comedic timing. He
Cool.
just went into dramatic acting.
Yes.
But then we love stand up, and we'd seen Nick Swartzen and wanted to work with him really badly, and he was great. And then we read a lot of Katie's, and we met Jenna Fisher, and fell in love with her right away. She was fantastic, and it sort of went from there. I mean, Romany Malco was great.
I love him.
He had just been in 40-Year-Old Virgin and was sort of incredible and a great breakout there. And then there were all these sort of little roles that were just people we had always wanted to work with, like, Rob Corddry, the great Rob Corddry, who we've worked with since on most every movie. And, we asked Luke Wilson to do something as a favor, and he did it. As you know, there's sort of like camps, and that was during the sort of the Ben camp and the beginning of the Judd camp. And so it was an exciting time where there were a community of comedians that were all working together. And I think there was a lot of camaraderie to not only like be in each other's movies, but to kind of support and help each other. So it was a cool time for comedy, and it really helped us because we were first-time filmmakers. So the momentum of that was a real like positive thing that helped get the whole thing cast.
My little experience of working with like Showalter and like, whatever, he's friends with all those guys, and is that when they get together, there is a lot of like bits and like one-upmanship, and it's a lot of like herding cats, And so
it's the most inefficient day on set when everyone's there.
So can you talk about like trying to capture the magic in an organized way? Like, how was that? And I'm sure not every day was like that.
We had this really interesting conversation with a director who had shot a film like this before. And what they sort of said was, there's a huge amount of pressure on Will Ferrell, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like everybody just assumes, oh, thank God he's here to save my movie.
Yeah.
And he's coming off of his life, and he's tired, and he's punched out from having just come off of 2 other movies. And he doesn't always just like show up on set, like ready to be 1,000 times funny. And so what they really said is you really need to have joke writers on set. You really need to like mass things that you can be lobbing at him from behind the camera, because what he'll do then is either go, oh, that's really funny, and say it, or shake his head and go, no, I can do better. And it kind of wakes him up. It's a very like interactive thing. And so we really just, Will and I would just like, mine all of our friends who were funny, hired a lot of extra people, got favors, we wrote jokes. Everybody would just collect lists of jokes, and you would kind of have them behind the monitor and just kind of get the machine rolling.
It's the same thing with actors, getting Will. It was exciting because, they're now all friends, but, Arnett had not worked with Ferrell before. So like that was a really exciting union to watch. And Amy had worked with Will, on SNL, and Corddry hadn't worked with Will. So it was almost like when you would get a day player or a small part, as Josh said, there was a lot of pressure in kind of an exciting and great way to get somebody who could punch up against Will and sort of, help stoke his flame. And that was a real part of the process. But it was also, just to go back to something, an out-of-town movie is a really special experience. And it's funny because a lot of actors want to be in LA, obviously, because of their families. And we get that. We want to be here, too, because of our families. But there's something about when you go and you take the show on the road that's like summer camp, and, you're sort of living and breathing a 360-degree experience. And I think we also went to Montreal, and there had been so much, the table read and Ben being in and out. And then when we kind of got to Montreal, there was this amazing first night that we'll never forget in sort of this crappy bar in the hotel, restaurant. And it was like us and Will and Amy and, Will Ferrell and Heater and everybody. And it was like this giant celebration. And we stayed up late, and everyone was doing bits. And, we ended up
broke into Stuart Kornfeld's room and threw his laundry out of the window.
I mean, we were young. All of that aside is to say that, you kind of want to build an energy and a community behind a movie. And I think that was really helpful being out of town for those couple weeks, because it was really us, Amy and Will, and John just on the road. And that was a really magical time that had we shot, I think, in Los Angeles, and you did that thing where it's like you give the, pass at the gate and you leave at 5 o'clock or 8 o'clock, if you're lucky. It's just a different experience. And it really created this vibe of, the ensemble, which was great. But it was tricky because there were days, especially for the end sequence, at the sort of the big Olympic event, where it would be on the call sheet, we would look at like days where it would be the whole cast and Ben would come to be on set those days. And like, we were like, we're never going to get through this, just wrangling people, away from each other and trying to
totally
make a movie in the midst of like the greatest comedy community party, and we want to be part of that.
The party going on at the monitor was really great. You were just like, to your point, you just wanted to get that in front of the camera. None of the best material happened like, during lunch.
Right. Oh my God.
Those two are nothing but a couple of freaks.
Yeah, and the media loves freaks.
Makes my blood boil. And all they're doing is just leeching the dignity out of our beloved sport.
I'm not a violent person, but I would like to hold them down and skate over their throats.
No exaggeration. I could not love a human baby as much as I love this brush.
Okay, so is there anything else from the shoot that sort of stuck out to you about Will or his performance or about John or about any of the cast or the production?
I think one thing, because it was our first movie, we were learning alongside the process. Do you know what I mean? So like every day was like grad school for us because we, as Josh said, we had made a lot of commercials. We had made successful short films and we were writers. Like we were writing for studios on assignment and stuff like that. But we hadn't really been on a movie set and understanding that. And I think one thing that really sticks out in my memory of it is how a really great actor and specifically a great co-star really understands and learns the pros, cons, strengths, and weaknesses of who they're up against. And I think what was really exciting about John Heder and Will was these are really unlikely guys. They didn't cross over. John Heder is not part of that comedy community at that time.
Yeah.
He was just a kid from the middle of nowhere that got shot through a cannon because of this independent film. And Will, to his credit, really took John under his wing and they really learned each other's energy and found a common language and a common ground. And really sort of, that was so exciting for us to see because as that grew and strengthened, that's what we think made the movie work, is that they weren't just two people sort of trying to steal each other's spotlight. There was a true generosity of spirit. And it's not, I don't think that's the most logical thing that you would imagine would happen with Will Ferrell, not because of Will Ferrell, but because he's a star in his own right. People are going because his name's above the title first, but he really just decided alongside the movie and its need that it was about the two of them and it was about that sort of friendship.
You could see a genuine friendship happening between them a little bit, which was heartwarming and sweet. We also tried to shoot the movie as much in sequence as possible because it's such a progressive movie in terms of their relationship. So it's sort of genuine when you get to the end of the movie and they're falling across each other.
That's what I was going to say, is that you rarely get what we got. And since then we've made movies, that have had bigger budgets and more planning and all that kind of stuff. We never get to shoot in sequence. So it's like we really, when John falls, during their trials and Will says, come on, get up. And there's that sort of, even Josh and I were like, did that just happen? Because meaning, it was the line between sort of their characters and themselves was very blurred in a very translucent and exciting way that was fun for us to watch. And also an education going forward in terms of co-stars and chemistry and romantic chemistry and how to sort of foster the right environment where actors and co-stars can really support each other and bring the best to the movie. And that's something that I think stuck out for us in a big way, and specifically about Will. And again, like Josh said, the common response is, oh my God, you must have had the best time. He's just such a funny guy. And the truth is, for sure. But he's also like a great leader and a great ensemble actor and a great generosity of spirit that really helped the chemistry of that movie, because it really could have been slight because there's not as much meat on the bones as there is the atmosphere that was created with their energy. So I think that's a big part of what made the movie work. And, and also, Will and Amy are lovely and they were excited to be there. So there was a lot of, I mean, it was a very difficult movie, but there was a lot in the cast that gave us a real momentum and gave us sort of a leg up on success.
I love when you hear firsthand accounts of something that you suspect to be true. I've observed him. I've had a lot of friends who worked with him, and that he's not only like, you know, obviously one of the funniest men alive, but a proper leader and someone who understands like all the weight that comes with leadership. And it's not just about you, it's about the people you're bringing up and supporting. So that's so awesome to hear. I love that so much.
Also super lucky that our first movie was with him because, you know, not all comedy people are nice, you know what I mean? And they can
often quite the opposite. Yeah.
Quite damaged. And Will is one of those very rare people that is, as you said, one of the funniest people on the planet, but also genuinely a kind of grounded, good person. There's not a lot of demons in that closet. So we were lucky, you know what I mean?
Ugh, I love that, guys. Okay, the studio has seen a lot of the work before you're even finished wrapping because you had to show it to them. Was the edit then post-wrap quite seamless? Like, did it sort of come together because you had this break?
It was relatively. We had done all of the tension and bad stuff had happened during, like Will said, we had to show a very like half-baked cut to the studio. They tried as well as they could not to be freaked out, but they were, you could feel, you know, that you could feel that they were like worried. It was not a cheap movie for the time. It was expensive. And
yeah.
And so there was a lot of pressure on it. And so like we kind of went through and took our licks leading up to it. And then when we showed the cut with the sequences in, finally, it was a pretty euphoric response from them. And at that time, you know, Stacey Snider had come on to the studio and she was sort of seeing it with fresh eyes and was very, very bullish on it. And so from that point on, I remember it being very smooth. You know what I mean? Like it was, we were lucky in that way.
It was really the first part that was, as Josh said, was the hardest part because we were, again, showing a musical with no music.
I think we described it as a porn with no sex scenes.
Yeah, exactly. That's another way of saying it. The good stuff was not there.
Were you so grateful to have each other, and did you manage to maintain calm? Like, who was helpful to you guys in those moments of like anxiety?
We had a great editor in Rick Pearson who had been through a lot of movies like this. And, and, you know, I remember the first test screening of this movie in Sacramento. We flew up and it was like the first time we'd shown it in front of an audience, and you're terrified. Like you think it played okay, but you have no idea. You know, people come at you from the shadows and tell you, you know, if it doesn't test well, you know, they'll take the movie away from you. You know, you hear all these horror shows. And so I remember this like 10 minutes where we were just sitting in a projection booth with.
It was horrible.
It was horrible. And I'll never forget, I think it was a Ridley Scott movie. It was like spooling out in the next theater and this. And I just remembered like Ridley Scott, just on this like reel. And, you know, Rick really helped us kind of calm down. And then luckily it tested really, really well. And then we were euphoric, but there was, you know, there were dark moments where you were like, oh my God.
Really dark. I mean, that's what's great about having a partner, and, you know, we really help each other. And I think because there's two of us, we're a little more susceptible to bringing somebody else in because we open process, you know, like we're not speaking in codes. So two of us are speaking of our anxieties. As Josh said, in the editing room, our editor was a great sort of therapist / you know, counselor / brother to us. But Stuart at the time, you know, he was a funny, difficult, challenging, brilliant, you know, all the things. But, you know, what he had was experience and we needed it. And he really had been through a lot of these comedies and understood how they worked. And I think that was really reassuring. And Ben certainly was reassuring. Like we had those titans when we needed them.
Yes.
And I think for the most part, I think maybe we got into one fight, you and I, Josh, but not really. Usually when the pressure comes on.
The advantage of us is also we'd come up with this thing, which we don't do anymore, but we would always agree with each other. And so it would be like, you know, we'd sit there and be like, I agree with my partner. And Stuart Cornfield would be like, really? You agree with your partner? Fucking surprise, you know? So it was like, we were able to kind of ballast each other a little bit.
But I think the funny thing about doing your first movie, and maybe it was that time, I don't know if this still happens, but especially a studio movie, there's so much mythology about getting fired. Like that was our biggest, because there's like a rule, Josh, right, where it's like if the first 2 weeks is the window for the DGA that they're allowed to fire you.
Right, and it would always be this thing of they'll never fire you on a Monday or a Tuesday, always on a Friday.
Right.
So like when Friday would roll around for the first couple of weeks, we were like terrified. You know what I mean?
So it was sort of like this very childlike, monster under the bed feeling, because we had heard so much about. Because I think there had been a couple movies in that time where first-time directors had been fired off comedies, and so it was lingering in the air, and there was a lot of like, oh my God, it's Friday. Are we going to get fired today? I mean, it stopped after the second week, but there was definitely, as your first movie, it was a lot to juggle, and so that brought its own level of anxiety.
It was also a very big, expensive movie for a first-time director. In hindsight, it was a lot. You know what I mean? To take on.
Yeah.
This is like the longest answer to the shortest question.
I love it. I love it. I'm like literally just like,
but it was interesting because it was like, we had DreamWorks and we had a strong executive in Jeremy. We had Ben Stiller, we had Stuart, we had Jimmy Miller, and, looking after, all of his actors, and we had Will, and, so there were a lot of eyes on what we were doing. And thankfully, ultimately great, helpful, and supportive, but a lot to report to at that point in our experience.
But it was also advantageous because you could also, use anybody's name. You could, well, Will liked this joke. You know what I mean? And it would be like,
totally.
Okay. Yeah, you could kind of.
Oh my God, genius.
And even in casting other roles, I mean, you had a tremendous amount. We underestimated how much momentum you get by that. I mean, because that was just our first movie. We assumed, well, this is what it's always like.
Right.
And, when you go forward into doing other movies and you're cast and you're trying to get somebody to come and do a half-day part, and it's harder. You really realized afterwards, how much we were in the catbird seat without even realizing it.
Totally.
Because of those people and that community.
The film did so well. I assume it sort of surpassed expectations. It made, I think we have it made 150 million worldwide. Incredible. Did you guys feel like everything changed for you after that? Like, were you suddenly like the flavor of the town? Like, talk to me about your own personal journey after this movie comes out and it's your first film.
I think we weren't aware of it as much as I wish we were at the time. You know what I mean? But we had a lot of wind on our back, and we had just come off of a big successful run of commercials that we had done for, we did all of Geico's original commercials. So we did the Caveman and the...
Oh my God. Amazing.
It was sort of like a magical summer of...
Sure.
Of,
when it rains, it pours. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it was a really exciting time. And it gave us a lot of opportunity. And I think there's, as Josh said, many cars that drove by that we wish we'd gotten into in hindsight, and some that we did get into. But
right.
It was exciting.
It was also sort of strangely because we had known each other since NYU, and we had all this pressure on ourselves in our 20s to like make it, you know what I mean? And it felt at a certain point like, well, is that just in our heads? Or are we just like, stupidly arrogant and we don't deserve it and we're not going to do it? And I think the success of that movie kind of just sort of gave us the confidence that we needed to go forward. It was sort of like, yeah, you're not totally.
You deserve to be in the room. Totally.
Yeah, you have some business in this business. So
what happened also was that we had said no to a lot of things stupidly when we were young, because I think we were ultimately scared. And I think that was a movie that we decided we were about to say no to again. And not no because it wasn't ours, but, just like, no, we don't want to pursue it. And I think it was sort of a turning point for us, creatively, because we were like, well, maybe we should do something that's coming our way.
We should start saying yes more often. And
right.
It's really good.
Guys, this was such an extraordinary journey. Thank you so much for this. I would love to have you back.
Yeah.
You're delightful, and you're like, just remember everything, and the stories are fantastic. I think this is going to be such an incredible pod.
So nice to meet you, and again, I'm fans of the pod.
You guys are great. Thank you. Thanks for listening.
I never had a father, okay? But I don't care. Because now I've got a brother. This is my brother. This is my brother's new girlfriend. Oh, and she is not a whore.
Oh my God. That was such a fun episode. I loved hearing about the sort of ensemble that was created, led by Will Ferrell, one of the all-time greats. I sort of feel like this does typify a theatrical film that isn't really made as much anymore. And we've been talking a lot about this, about like Barbie possibly hearkening a resurgence of fun, jovial, lighthearted comedy, which is, comedy is hard, right? Comedy is as hard as drama. I think it's sometimes harder. And for whatever reason, big comedies with big stars have gone a little bit out of vogue, it feels like. And this reminded me of how much I love them. They're so fun. They're not as expensive, and people love them. People go out in droves. So tell me what you were struck by the episode and by the film just being a representative of films that used to get made.
I love that this was such a reminder of those types of movies that I used to love. I used to love going to see, and I think people still love. You know what I mean? These are the types of movies that are played on TV all the time because people want to watch them.
Yeah.
And it was really fun to me to hear how great of a leader Will Ferrell was. And also Ben Stiller, the fact that it was supposed to be Ben's part, and he backed out because he thought he had done too many similar movies,
right,
and had played too many similar roles. But he loved it so much, and he was already on board, that he decided to stay on and produce, and really was put his power behind it. And then Will came on, and the fact that he was such a leader and really worked with John, who was still pretty new to the industry, and took him under his wing. And I loved the story of how he needed to be kind of woken up every day on set by bouncing jokes off of.
I love that so much.
People.
We didn't even talk enough about that. I love that.
That was so cool.
You got to like warm up the chops.
You got to like get the comedy brain fired.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to warm that up. And especially if you have like, a 6 a.m. call time and you're probably exhausted and you've been
totally
physically training for this. So to try to like get on that train, on the comedy train to go.
Yeah.
It makes so much sense, especially coming from such a collaborative place like SNL, right?
Yes.
It's
like,
they probably do that all the time. So that was cool to hear that a lot of the stuff was improv and a lot of the lines were changed.
I love that too. And like also comedy, it's like you're Will Ferrell, you're paid, I don't know how many millions because it's your job. You're the funniest person, one of the funniest people alive, but it doesn't exist in a vacuum. And you need other things to like play off of in order to like get those muscles firing. And all I can say is like, I've observed this a bit, we've made a couple movies with Michael Showalter, who is a little bit a part of that like crew of comedians. And I remember going to lunch with him once with Riva in LA, and we were at the Brentwood Country Mart, my favorite spot, Beck's, the farm.
Of course.
And we're waiting to sit down, and Will Arnett walks in, and it's like a language. It's a different language for these comedians. Yeah. Like they immediately went into a bit. They were immediately sparring back and forth and one-upping each other. And, again, story of my life, not the story of Will Arnett's or Michael Showalter's, but I just remember like crying with laughter. Just like there was nothing planned. It was just like something about parking a car or waiting for a table or not being important enough to be seated immediately or whatever it was. It was like taking the environment and just like working off of that. And I just realized those minds, they work differently than mine. And they're always looking for the thing to one up each other. And I just feel like that's magic, and if you can capture that on film, that is magic,
right. But in order to try to recreate that natural environment, when you're on a set with 100 plus crew members and their cameras and everything, I think that's where Will and Josh like really succeeded, was realizing, oh, this is how the comedians thrive. So how do we bring that to the set? And it worked. And I do think magic happened on that movie.
That's right.
It's so funny.
I think we talked about this once before on another pod, but just that was I always had heard this about Judd Apatow movies, that he would just let the camera go forever and ever and ever and ever, and just let, Seth Rogen and Jonah Hill and whomever just play off of each other and like just try to capture the magic like in the real world. We're just like letting a camera run. And it's the stuff that works. You know, it's like sometimes you cannot plan for the greatest comedy genius to happen. You just have to create the environment.
The majority of the time, it's probably not planned.
Right.
Those iconic moments that you think about, you know?
And so I loved hearing about that. I loved hearing that these young directors knew enough to know what not to get in the way of. And they really managed to achieve a film in the Red Hour sort of lexicon that like really holds up. I mean, Red Hour at that time in the aughts was making Zoolander. They were making Dodgeball. They were making Tropic Thunder. They were making films that like were truly the top of the pyramid. And they were working with the best filmmakers, the best actors in the business. And these guys, Josh and Will, knew enough of like how to stand with the best of them. So that was great. That was so fun to hear.
Yeah.
Bex, are there any fun facts that our loyal listeners should know about?
Yeah, we maybe touched on this one in the Napoleon Dynamite episode, but John Hader spent 2 years in Japan as a Mormon missionary and learned to speak Japanese fluently. And he showcased that talent during the press conference when he responded flawlessly to a reporter's question posed in Japanese.
Brilliant. Love that.
So fun.
Fascinating.
Bunch of real-life skaters made cameos in the movie, including Scott Hamilton, Peggy Fleming, Brian Boitano, Dorothy Hamill, Nancy Kerrigan.
I didn't even get a chance to ask these guys whether they got the buy-in of like the World Skating Organization. Obviously, they got a lot of the like former champions to be a part of it and be in the film, but like it felt like a fictionalized organization and fictionalized rules, obviously. But I wondered if like, you know, the skating world was very supportive of the movie. I mean, obviously it's all in good fun, so I would hope so. But I'm always so curious about that. Because we talked, you know, we've been talking a lot about getting the buy-in of the actual organizations like MLB for Major League and that kind of thing. And it's like, it behooves you to get their support, right?
Right.
So I'll have to ask those guys.
One more fun one, just because I feel like this is kind of cool.
Yeah.
During a training scene, Jimmy and Chaz are wearing Adidas and Puma warm-up suits, and that's a reference to the famous Dassler brothers rivalry, who after a feud split their shoe company to form Adidas and Puma.
Oh, right.
I mean, those are little things that you don't even notice.
Oh my God, look at that Easter egg. I love that. I love that. Okay, well, that was such a fun episode. I love hearing the tales of it all. Love our loyal listeners so much. Thank you guys for listening. Keep going. Have to give a shout out to Laura Major. She's such a loyal listener. She sent us a gift, right, Bex? She sent us a book of like film quotes that we have to start using soon. She listens to every single episode. I love her so much. I hope she recovers well. She had this like horrible skiing accident a few months back and she's recovering, hopefully listening to the pod.
Yeah.
Laura, we love you so much. And Bex, do the wrap up.
Our brand new beautiful merch, everybody. You can go to our website, Stay Gold Features, and click on the merch section and get some of our Hollywood Gold podcast sweatshirts, which are very comfortable and very cute.
Yep.
Thank you, as always, for listening. Please remember to like and subscribe. DM us anytime if you want to just talk about movies. We're here. And remember to stay gold.
Stay gold, guys. Bye.